Crazy.
Amazing. That's
So
crazy.
now we're going to make magic happen. We got
Here
some
we
people
go.
that are in the room waiting. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to surprise them with a early kickoff, so they're excited. Waiting for, you like that? Try to get people
Perfect.
tell us a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get going, and I'll admit people, and I'll make the introduction, then we'll fly.
Perfect.
All right, so let's see. We've got a few people joining in. So as we kick this thing off, I am Sandy Middleman coming to you from West Palm Beach. I'm not sure who's on right now that has been on before any of the presentations I've done and had the guests that I've been lucky enough to have or not. Whoever hasn't been on one of the presentations, I reside in West Palm Beach, been coaching professionally, high performance professional players for almost 30 years. It feels like more, but anyways, that's just a little humor. I have to lighten up the Friday afternoon. But I want to welcome everybody, and most importantly, Sabrine Tamburero, who is coming to us from Montreal, and she has been graced me with her presence today, so it's fantastic. I want to welcome her in from Tennis Canada. Whoever doesn't know her, she is the head or the director of U10 Development for Tennis Canada and the high performance clubs. So Sabrine, thank you very much for being here today. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see everybody connecting today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So for everybody out there who's tuning in and the rest that will come in, Sabrine and I have talked a couple times in the last week about both the subject matter and how we wanted to approach this presentation so that we felt like everybody would get the most value out of the hour we're going to spend. So everybody knows by now, or if you don't, the subject matters we're going to cover are girls tennis, how can we get more female coaches in our sport, and under 10 development. And what we thought we'd do is we thought we'd go through each subject matter. Please feel free, if you're out there and watching, please feel free to throw any questions you have. We're open to them. Sabrine and I have talked about that quite a bit. We feel like the interaction's fantastic. And the more questions we get, maybe the more interesting it actually becomes for everybody. So please feel free to do that, and we'll do our best to get to all of them, because maybe it's not always the easiest thing to get to all of them as they come in, but we'll do our best, and I will do my best. We're going to go through each subject matter, and then once we get through all the subject matters, then we're going to simply open it up towards the end for complete Q&A. So if you've got questions on your mind, you want to leave them till the end, throw them out in between, not a problem. So Sabrine, what I thought we would do is kick it off with talking about girls tennis. And as you and I have talked about on our calls and away from the sort of the camera, so to speak, I've mentioned that in my coaching career, without attempting to do it, I've spent probably 75 to 80% of my career working with girls. So I thought it's a pretty interesting subject matter, and with your expertise and your view, I thought we could tackle that. And one of the bullet points I referenced in that I think is pretty important is seeing, respecting their passion, their creativity, and their strengths. So as a coach, being able to see those things. I've been a big believer in that, whether it's young kid, teenage girl, girl transitioning to maybe the college or professional level, traveling around the world to ITF. I believe that seeing, respecting their passion, their creativity, and their strength is invaluable to the process of helping them grow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great start, Sandy. And interestingly enough, I just read from the Canadian Women in Sport a research that they started in February, and they were showing that, and I think that it's a reflection not just on Canada, I think it's pretty much everywhere in the world, but it's really clear that young girls are really not participating as much as we would like in sports. And also we see very clearly that there's a drop between 13 and 16 in regards of girls staying in the not just the competition aspect of things, but the playing aspect of sports. So I think it was interesting that we're starting this conversation today and seeing that there's numbers now that are kind of showing that we need to do better. And I think one thing about that is exactly like you mentioned. One thing that we have a tendency to do is to put the girls in a box, to say that girls are not competitive. They don't like to be playing points, or they just like to have fun. I think that we need to make sure that we're also individualizing that approach, because the reality is, I know a lot of young girls, they love to compete. They love to be out there. They love to be creative with their tennis. And sometimes we're like, oh, don't go to the net because, little girls are too afraid to be there. And I'm like, no, that's where they want to be. That's where they want to be challenged. So I totally agree with you. We need to bring that creativity on. I think we need to also break that mold of girls that don't like to compete because they love to compete. The difference is, you know what? The little boys, they want to have the result. They want to have success. They want to win. They hate to lose. Little girls, they do hate to lose. They also want to win, but they really care about how they do it. And that's a big, big difference in the girls versus the boys, because at the end of the day, all those kids, what they want is they want to have fun. They want to enjoy playing and competing. And that's not a matter of girls or boys.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely interesting views. And I love the approach and the thought process you have in terms of the competitive aspect in particular. And also too, the creativity and the coming to net. You and I touched on that in our conversation. And one of the reasons why I really like that is I have a habit. I don't know if you do in your professional experience coaching and working with kids, but I have a habit of making reference points to top players, because that they are the models. You look at the top players and at whatever level, whenever you're doing your coaching, and you look at them and say, okay, what do they do, right? What do they do? Do they really compete hard? Do they shy away from the competitive aspect? Are they just playing fast? We talked about that, right? Playing fast and trying to hit the ball fast and hit the ball aggressive. And one of my things right now, and I guess it makes sense that you're coming to us from Montreal or from being in Canada, is that right now, if you look at the women's game, what do you see at the top? You see somebody like Bianca Andreescu, who you and I have talked about quite a bit, who's ultra competitive, unbelievable competitive when she gets out there. The bigger the moment, the more fight she brings. And everybody appreciates it and talks about it. But then sometimes when you're working with younger girls, you're sort of shying away from it. And I've never understood that. Even like other girls like Kenin, right? She's fiery out there. Golf, so if you look at those models, you see that, yeah, it is. You should definitely encourage it, right? Encourage the coming to the net, encourage the fight, because, yeah, that's what helps get those girls to the top of the sport. So it's definitely interesting. Look, as we move on to the next bullet point, the thing that I referenced and we should talk about is understanding and supporting their path. Understanding what their path is, why it's their path, and then trying to support and guide them through that path. And I'm a big believer in that, because I think oftentimes we look at a particular kid, right, a particular girl, and we just sort of have this thing in our head that says they should go that way, whatever that way might be. But I think understanding who they are and what they want, and then helping them sort of travel in that direction and guiding them that way and encourage that, I think is the best option. What are your thoughts on understanding and supporting their path?
Yeah, listen, you bring a good point. I think for me, the way I would describe it is being to individualize our approach. That's something we don't do. We put everybody in the same box, little boys or little girls. It's the same way. And I want to come back to your point with Bianca, because one thing that we have to move away to be able to have a path, we need to have a vision. Because the vision is going to dictate the process, going to dictate what we're going to do. And one thing that we have to change is the perspective of women's at a higher level. Because I remember when Serena Williams was, and even Venus, and even other players like Justine Henin, the first thing we said about those women was, oh my God, they play like boys. Like, what do you mean they play like boys? They play the way they play. And the only reason we said that is because they were strong, because they had a big serve, because they were good at the net. But you know what? Girls can do it too. So I think for me, until we change that perspective at the higher level, it's going to be very difficult to bring young girls into their creativity, like you mentioned, and into the pathway if that end vision is not changing. So I think we need to bring those girls to the aspect of trying to improve the all-around game that they have, trying to dictate, what is their personality. And I'm saying that to you, and honestly, that's something I use for boys and girls. I don't think that's strictly based on girls. The other thing I'm going to add, Sandy, to what you mentioned is the perspective of mixity. I had a coach last week that asked me, Seb, do you think at a younger age we should have only girls group? And my answer to that is no. Because if we want to change the way we perceive girls in sport, we need to have more girls and boys training together. But what I would say is that we do need to give the little boys their time and sometimes the little girls their time. So you have those 2-hour sessions that you can do once a month where you gather the girls together, where you gather the boys together. And the only reason is because the purpose of training is going to be a bit different. The boys going to want to have a tournament and let's go play and let's have points. The girls will want to have a tournament with points, but also work on their skill set because that's what they want to focus a bit more. So that's, I think, if that structure is better and is changing, I do think that we're going to keep more girls in our sport. And I do think we're going to have more players in our sport. I think that's an overall statement for boys and girls.
Yeah, you brought up some interesting points, and out of everything you said, one of the things stood out to me, and I've always believed in this, and I always will, and it would take a lot for anybody to change my mind, which is developing the all-court game, okay? Because I truly believe that if you look around the world, and you and I talked about this a lot, that you've had your experiences for years traveling the world. I've had my own. We both know a lot of people, probably similar people, and then obviously a lot of different people. And if you look at the way I think a lot of girls train or are trained, training and are trained are different, right? Okay, doing what you're being asked or told to do, and then the person guiding and dictating the development process. I really believe that they need to be looking at overall development, overall game, right? So being able to serve and volley, being able to chip and charge, being able to, take the transition shots, hit and come in, and starting at an early age, I think is the best way. Because I say to coach friends of mine all the time, we have the conversation casually and not in a professional manner, just relaxed as friends. But I always say, when you can find a girl that loves to come forward when she's young, okay, athletic, and it sort of has that inner belief, if you can keep her on that pathway, eventually she could be a world-class player, because there's way too many girls out there that once game plan A isn't working, you already know there's nothing left because they weren't trained that way, right? So I really believe that all court game is invaluable to the growth, and then the training difference between sometimes only with the boys and the girls, and then together a lot, right? So I think those are really interesting points. Another reference point that you and I talked about that I think is pretty interesting is the idea when you're coaching to be able to be listening, understanding, and pushing them, right? First to listen to them, what they say, how they feel, what they think. The next is to understand it all, because it's two different things, listening and understanding it. And then once you listen and understand, then knowing what to do to sort of push them to a better place, a stronger place. What are your thoughts on the idea of listening, understanding, and then pushing them?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I would use adapting. I think that's one thing that in coaching we don't do a lot. Sometimes we go in, we have our session, we don't adapt. And also adapting means making sure that we explain the process more when we do have girls and we have boys in the same group. because there will be a lot of question with, why should we do this? And why should we do that? And you know what? Our reflexes as coaches is like, oh, I'm the coach. Can you please follow the guidelines and what I'm telling you? Yes, you're right. But at the same time, that's what mostly little girls will ask you. Why should we do this? Why should we do that? So the listening aspect, I agree with you. That's something we need to do more. The other thing is when you say to make sure that we have them and we push them. I think what we want to do, and again, for me, it's little boys and little girls. I think we need to make sure that we bring them outside their comfort zone. I think sometimes we leave the little girls in the comfort zone. They are looking for challenges. They are looking to be challenged. And then we say, oh, no, you know, they're fragile mentally. What kind of stereotypes? We never heard that as young girls, you know. Oh, they're not competitive enough. Oh, they're crying. I don't know about you guys in the world, in the States, in France, and everywhere, but I've seen more little boys cry than little girls in tournaments. So I don't think that's something to do with the girls only. And the last thing that I would say is that making sure that those little girls that we have, if we want to keep them, is creating an environment for that. Because most of the time, the environment is the reason why young girls are dropping out, because the coaches has been too negative, because the coaches is not listening, because the coaches is not involving them into what they're doing. And one thing that I would say to all of you guys coaches out there, one mistake that I've done, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to do because it's not easy to change, we always focus on what's not working versus what works. And you know what? There's little girls that come in and they're unable to hit a backhand, but they have amazing forehand. Focus on the forehand. And I think by creating that aspect of focusing on what's positive and what's working, and then come in with what's not working, it's much easier to keep our kids in our sport, and mostly girls. Because when you go to 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hour sessions, and you come back home, and the only thing that you're able to say is, oh, my backhand sucks. Oh, I've been told my footwork is not good. Oh, I've been told that girls, they don't know how to serve. They're making a lot of double faults. There's no way they're going to stay in sport. There's no way. So that's what I would say that we need to do better, is focus on what works. Don't be afraid to train what works. Don't be afraid to maintain that in your training, and then bring what's not working. And I think that environment is going to be so much more positive for young girls to stay on for a longer time.
Yeah, interesting. You brought up a couple of good, really interesting, and I think really good points. One is about the idea of, you know, the positive view, right? It's so easy when you're on the court with kids, okay? It's so easy to see what you think is wrong, okay? I mean, so it doesn't matter what level or age they are, right? You go on the court and you look, and you're almost innately looking for problems, right? I think I've always thought, and I think you agree with this, we've talked about it a little bit, but I always believe that great coaching is about understanding where things are, but looking for solutions. Because there is no one player out there. Doesn't matter what level you work with, what their ranking is, what their results have been, you know, who's writing about them, they're the next thing. It doesn't matter. Everybody goes on the court everywhere in the world, and guess what everybody has in common? Guess what? There's one thing that everybody's got in common. Every kid, okay, and every coach. Every kid, every practice is going to miss. Nobody goes through a whole practice without missing, right? And no coach goes through a whole practice without seeing a mistake. They're guaranteed. So I think we have a habit of focusing on that instead of focusing on, oh, wow, the forehand's really good, right? And then encouraging the positive and then trying to develop and go from there. But I definitely think you make up a really good point. The next bullet point, actually, the next part of the outline, actually, it goes to something you brought up in the beginning of the conversation. The idea that they don't have to fit a mold, right? They don't have to fit a mold. And I think that's really important, because I think that, as you know, oftentimes we have this habit, right? Of, okay, people are playing, girls are playing fast and aggressive, right? Okay, that's what they do. So you automatically start to fit them into a mold of maybe how they play or how they're supposed to think, or, or act, or whatever it is. And I think that we both agree that they don't have to, right? Okay, you have to see the individual in them, right? Respect that, encourage that, and guide that, because that's what makes them them. And I think that's the exciting part, right? So what are your thoughts on they don't have to fit a mold?
Yeah, again, we're call it mold. I'm going to call it stereotypes, because
Yeah, sure.
because again, that's what it is. Girls don't serve. They double fault all the time, even if it's true. I'm not going to mention that, but but it's, we can't serve, we can't volley. We don't have a strong forehand. We can't move. We're not committed mentally. We're breaking down mentally. That's why there's a coach at the WTA at the international level, because women cannot make decisions. So we have to break that, because if we don't break that, we're going to coach young girls in that. And I'm happy to see some of my friends from Vancouver and Patricia from de France qui est aussi là. Salut Patricia, Aurélie, I see you. So, I know I've talked to those coaches, and we all say the same thing. It comes a point that we are coaching kids, and we'll talk about it in one of our conversation with U10, but sometimes we have a tendency to too early at a younger age to really split the boys and the girls, even in our coaching. And I think we have to be careful about that, because the reality is you would have young girls that in the physical department will be so much better than boys. I don't know if you guys have seen U8 and U9 boys skipping ropes and girls. It's the same thing. But when you see the boys trying and working on it, they're amazing after like a few practices. So the girls, it's the same thing. So I think we need to change that stereotypes that we have around the game. And with that, we need to, like you mentioned, one thing that we need to do is identify also the different personalities that we have on court, that we have as young girls. And I remember at the time that Serena Williams and Venus started playing, it was a tendency where all the women were taking their forehand when the ball was coming in the middle. That's what we did as coaches. That's how we trained. And it continues to bring success. But I remember when those two came in, what did they do with that ball? They took it on their backhand. And why they did that? Because the dad said, you know what? You're good. You're strong. That's your strength. Let's focus on that and let's build around that. And I think that's what we need to do better as coaches, to make sure that we're going to bring those girls into a larger perspective of our sport. And hopefully by doing that, they're going to stay much longer.
Yeah, you brought up some really good point. I like the point about the skipping rope part. I like that. That's good. But no, look, you're right. I think that sometimes we have the habit as coaches, and I'm sure everybody's got their own habit and their own approach. But the truth is when you see certain players doing things at the top of the sport, Serena, Venus, it doesn't really matter who, but who's ever up there, you make those reference points and you see, right? I mean, look, long time ago, I can't even think about what year it was at this point, probably 95 through 97-ish, somewhere in that time frame. You had Martina Hingis, right? Okay. Short, 5'6" maximum in terms of height. Okay. But read the game unbelievable, like from a different place in her mind, right? Changed direction of the ball unbelievable. And one of the things that she was sort of famous for was when the ball came in the middle of the court, she used to redirect it with the backhand all the time. And nobody looked at her and said, oh, you have to hit that as a forehand, because everybody knew her backhand, she could like hit it on a dime. It was so good, right? Anywhere in the court. So I think, again, referencing those, those visuals, and then allowing somebody to be who they are. And if their strength is to hit that backhand, right, from the middle of the court, then you train it and they do it. So, those are interesting points for sure. Well, look, I think, honestly, we've gotten through all the bullet points of girls tennis. I'm not going to touch on the last one because we've actually already touched on it within the first four. so I don't think it makes sense to spend more time. We've got two people wrote in. Peter Grimsey. I don't know Peter. Maybe you do.
I do know Peter and Zach from Vancouver are on board, so that's great to see them.
Yeah, I've never met Peter. I've met Zach one time at the Orange Bowl quickly, and he's been super nice with his messages to me. So thanks for him for joining out. Now, Peter said this. He said, great point about girls-only classes. We tried this at my old club with some initial success. Oh, wait, hold on. I lost it because somebody messaged. But the girls were not encouraged to move back into the regular mixed classes with the boys. We failed to address the environment of the regular groups to retain more girls. So Peter wrote that, which I think is pretty interesting. And then you've got
yeah, and I'm gonna add
yeah,
Cindy to that in Canada and a lot in Vancouver, it started even before I did it. They're very proactive in regards of regrouping girls, doing girls camp, making sure that they're trying to increase that. And it's not easy. Even by doing that, it's very difficult. But what has been a success there is that perspective of environment, creating something that everybody wants to come and that the girls wants to come more and more and more. And I think that's the path that we want to take.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting. And as I read Peter's, feedback and what his experience was, and then hear you talk about that, it makes me do this quick memory recall of different programs I've been a part of or around, and how quickly girls are often, okay, you four go on that court. You know what I mean? Like, you four go on that court. Like, the boys go over there. And I've always felt like, is that really the best thing for their development, or is that more induced by sometimes how parents deal with the coaches who are organizing it, right? Okay, there's so many variables in that, but I definitely think having separation, but then putting them all back together as a big group and unit, I always feel like is the best way. Patricia, who you mentioned, right? You mentioned Patricia. I apologize, Patricia, if you hear me. I don't know how to pronounce your last name correctly, so I'm not going to try and sound really bad, even though I'm good with languages. But Patricia wrote, if a girl plays big serve and volley, or great forehand, people will say she plays like a boy. And then she says, ... so she will stop, ? So I think she's asking the question. What are your thoughts, Debbie, on that?
My thoughts is exactly my answer is in the question. And it's what I mentioned earlier. We have to stop putting stereotypes into what they should and shouldn't do. And it goes back, Cindy, to your opening. We need to make sure that those kids are creative and that the girls are creative. And the best example, I've been around a lot of clubs, and even sometimes I'm like, okay, boys, let's go play soccer, and girls, we're gonna just warm up and play here. Like the girls cannot play soccer. Why isn't the girl cannot hit hard, cannot have a big forehand, cannot have a big serve? So I encourage everyone to go outside of that mentality that we've been coached and that we as coaches are taking, and making sure that we're aware that if we are the coaches saying, what, you want to do volleys today? You can't volley. You're never there. You're afraid when you're there. Yeah, they're going to be afraid. But if we're the ones saying that, what do you think the girls don't want to do volleys in sessions? Because we didn't build the confidence, because we were negative on it. And you know what? If they suck, they suck. Who cares? There's a lot of little boys that I've seen around Canada that can't volley. So again, we have to go, for me, and like Patricia mentioned, if she has a good forehand, if she has a strong serve, if she want to try to do serve and volley and it works, the answer is why not? It's the same as saying to a young girl that says, you know what? I want to be the next Bianca Andreescu. My answer to that is like, why not? And there's a little girl that I brought to France. I know the parents are listening, and others that I've seen in Florida in the camp that I'm doing. And if they're telling you, parents, that they want to be the next Andreescu or the next Serena Williams, your answer should be, why not? And
Absolutely.
our
Absolutely.
job is to give them tools to try to do it. Now, if they're 25 years old and they're saying that they want to be the next Bianca or the next Serena, you tell them that they could be doing something else. but but again,
Yeah,
we
sure.
have to make sure that we're there to nourish that dream, and again, the end result, we have no idea. I always say it to the parents are funny sometimes. They come up to me and they're like, Sev, you know, is my daughter give 100%? I'm like, if she wouldn't be here, you know, if she didn't want to give 100%. So for
Right.
sure she gave 100%. Yeah, but you know, we're never sure because sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. Who cares? The reality is in a tournament, one person's gonna go home happy. One.
Right, right, right.
The rest gonna cry their eyes out. So we have
No,
to put this
yeah.
in perspective,
It,
right?
yeah, absolutely. You bring up some really good points. And I actually I want to very quickly and then move on to the next subject matter because I think it's super interesting and it can be a little bit interesting in conversation. But you brought up two good points. One is if they want to be the next Serena or they want to be the next, Bianca Andreescu, absolutely. Why not? Right? All you got to do is say, are you all in? Right? Are you all in? Because they were all in from the start. Right? You don't say why, you say why not. Right? And then the next part of it is when you're talking to a parent, because as you know, I told you I speak to many of them all the time. Whenever I start hearing the yeah, but, and then they're focusing on what they think the problem is, you need to be focusing on what you think the good stuff is and the solutions are, right? You say something and they say, yeah, but like you mentioned, right? Tennis is this funny, interesting, competitive world. Why? Because they start off in a draw and only one person really ends up happy when they leave. Everybody else is thinking about the things that went wrong, right? So it's definitely an interesting talking point. Before we jump to the next subject matter, I do not want to disregard Zach's question. So Zach says, curious to hear Sevi's thoughts on keeping girls engaged when they get older and they either get stronger or weaker than their tennis friends, which means they might be at different tournaments or training in different environments. And I think that's a really good question because I hear that a lot. What are your thoughts, Sevi?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And I have to say what's interesting is I think the older they get, the tougher it is to keep them. And the more important the environment they're in is. And when they're older, and I think that's what Zach is mentioning also in his question, is that they want to be part of something. You know, when we say tennis is an individual sport, it's not true. We compete individually. But we need to have a team around those girls if they want to stay on. We want to have the coaches there. You want to be with your friends. And sometimes your friends are in another club and in playing competition somewhere else. But I think it's part of what we have to do as coaches to create either with other clubs, because the reality is, if I look at the numbers that I was telling you in the beginning, there's less girls. So we need to go outside of the box. We need to bring those girls together, even if there are other coaches, other clubs, even other countries, and create something, events, camps, regroupings, match play, whatever it is, so they feel they're part of something. And I think if we do that better, we're going to be able to keep them and keep their interest. Because as older they get, sometimes, you know, the girls are smart. They're 15, 16, they're like, why should I train? I train because of what? You know, there's nothing for me. I don't want to go to college. And now I'm gonna do something else. And I think it's okay to do something else, but it's bad that they're leaving the sport for the wrong reason. So I think you talked about creativity. We need to be more creative. We need to create an environment. We need to bring the girls together. And what I'm going to add to that to finalize on this topic, Sandy, and again, I was asked about a coach last week on that, as much as we need to have mixity at a younger age and create little spots for girls to train together and boys to train together, it's reversed at an older age. Because At an older age, girls have different objectives. They travel differently than boys, not a problem. But we need to take some time to mix them together. I don't understand why when they're 15, 16 years old, we're saying, okay, now it's specific to their needs, it's specific to their games. We're just going to have the girls. And again, I hear it again today. They're too emotional. They're bitchy when they're together. I cannot hear that anymore. And I would say we're missing a great opportunity. And a quick story, I remember at the NTC when Charlotte Robillard-Millard, an amazing player, amazing girl, she stopped, she's coming back. And one of her best friends was Felix. And they wanted to be together. They ate together. Sometimes, you know, when they had time, they played together. So I would say that balance, whatever we need at a younger age, is kind of the opposite at the older age.
Interesting. Yeah, no, those are all really good points. And as you and I touched on when we talk on the phone, I think all these points are interesting because reality is, and we apologize to everybody, we feel like we could talk about all these points individually for hours. Well, unfortunately, we don't have hours. So with that being said, fantastic point of view, Sevi. And we're going to move on to the next subject, which we both find very interesting. So we hope you guys will too. How can we get more female coaches in our sport? And this is something you and I, we went for about 35 or 40 minutes on this. And I had my own thoughts and you had some really interesting points of view. One of the first things that we talked about is the fact that we don't believe, from our experience traveling around in our countries, outside of our countries, that club owners and directors and managers understand the value that hiring the female coaches adds to, number one, the club in general. Number two, adds to the program, the growth of it. And number three, can add to the overall development of the staff in general. We feel like they miss the boat greatly. So it's almost like when a girl's maybe going to coach potentially or thinking about, I want a career in coaching, she looks at websites or clubs and looks for opportunities and she looks at the profiles and what does she see? She sees like the boys club or the men's club, right? And so she shies away from it. And then it's maybe easier because she maybe was a player to some level, right? So what do you, maybe she goes to the circuit or something like that versus a club. What are your thoughts on in terms of how do we get more female coaches in our sport in terms of the way that maybe the clubs have to do things differently to encourage them?
How long do we have?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
We got all weekend, everybody. Sit tight.
Listen, first of all, I think to encourage that, we need more Sandy. We need more men being part of the solution. We need more men bringing the conversation to something that is an issue. So that's the number one thing. So I want to thank you, Sandy, to give the opportunity for me to discuss this topic
today. Thank you, Sandy. I got two pluses today.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true. That's part of it because, again, if it's not that, then it becomes a women thing. Then it becomes us against them. And that's not what it is. The second thing is, and you touched based on, is we need to create opportunities. And opportunities outside of, we are so good with little kids. That I can't hear anymore. We are amazing with little kids, as some of my colleagues, men coaches that are amazing with working with girls and working with young kids. So it's the same thing. Why are girls dropping out at 13, 16? Because there's no opportunities for them, either at college, either at coaching, or either at doing a business. And right away, we put them where? In an office. Are you going to be good in an office? No, what I want is the high performance job. I want to work and be the next Fed Cup captain, be on tour, and that's what I want to do. And I think we need to, again, create opportunities into the job scale, that it's either clubs, that it's either coaching, that it's either academies, federations. We need more women under that umbrella also, and as directors. Because the reality is, if we don't have that, and you mentioned it earlier, the young girls can't model what they can't. as I said in one of the seminar, I think it was with Kai a few months ago, you can't be what you can't see. It's that simple. And as a female coach, it's the same thing. We need to have more opportunities. We need to create those. We need to be not being afraid to go outside of the box. But unfortunately, it's the same thing. And I have the same challenges with my own coaching career and in my federation, where, you know what, sometimes it's easy and they say, you know, Sev, at this level, it's not possible to have a female because, you know, let's say on tour, the men, you know, they need someone to hit with them. I'm sorry, but there's no men coach that is hitting with his player. None, nada, no more. You know, see what I mean? So that's just a reason. And then they say, yeah, but I talked to a friend of mine that is coaching at university in the States. And it's like, yeah, but I think I'm going to select that coach because his win and loss is so much higher than the other one, for sure. He has so much more opportunity to coach at that level that his number is going to be higher. So we need to redefine what being competent is, because competent means a lot of things. And to end on that is that I cannot wait the moment. And I see a lot of female coaches, a lot of female faces today, where we're going to be able to say, I'm a tennis coach. And not, I'm a female tennis coach.
Right, sure.
And when we're going to get to that point, that's going to be amazing.
No, absolutely. All those points are well taken and understood. And look, I think that one of the mistakes that many people make in the industry when they do two things. Number one is they go to hire somebody for something, right? For a position. You know, you've heard it a million times. I've heard it a million times ad nauseum by now, right? Okay. When you're talking to somebody about a job, somebody says, can you hit? Right? Can you hit? And I'm like, does it matter? I mean, like, you're hiring me for what's inside my mind and what I know, female or male, either way, right? But we're talking about, obviously, female coaches. Don't make an assumption that, oh, yeah, they're going to be great with little kids, but they can't do this over here. They either know something and they can provide insight and value, right? Or they don't. Because I could say the same thing. If you look at I know a lot of guys, right? A lot of men coaches everywhere, okay? They're being hired for positions, and they're in positions where they can't play, right? They can't play, they can't run, but it doesn't matter, right? So I think that with the female coaches, yes, we got to get to a point where it's not even about that. It's just about they're a coach, right? That's it. They're a coach. Put them in this position because they're going to add value, right? So I think absolutely.
But Sandy,
yeah.
I want to add to that. I want to add to what you're saying because it's a true story. And like I said to a lot of female coaches I'm mentoring, is that in a way, it's unfortunate to say that, but again, I think it's great. It's a lose-lose. Whatever we do, we're too strong, not strong enough. We're too soft, not soft enough. So my recommendation is just be who you are, just have a voice. And it's better to be losing with your own identity than to lose with trying to be somebody else. And a funny story on that is that, as you know, a part of my job is to travel around the country and be working with amazing coaches and kids. And once I was in a club, and it was coming from a colleague of mine. He said, Sev, would you like to hit? And I know just the way he said it, it was to test my skills, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, not a problem. And then I go on, and I know some of the faces, and I know that some of the women coaches right now can kick anybody's ass. So I was on court, and I start to hit. Into 5 minutes, he turned around and said, oh my God, you can hit? And that was so interesting because, again, it's like it couldn't happen that we do have the level. that
Right.
we are able to train, compete, and play compared to some of the men coaches.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
so I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. Sometimes you turn on one end, and they say, "Oh, we want you to. You're competent enough." And when it's your turn, it's like, "Oh, out of a sudden, you don't know how to play. You're not strong enough. You're too
Right.
soft." It does. And one thing that I heard that blows my mind: it doesn't look very professional to have a woman with boys on a court, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's pretty interesting.
Well, that's pretty. Yeah, I agree. It's crazy what people think, and like you said, the only way to make the change, right, to make growth, is to have the conversation, right, over and over and over.
Have the conversation and
Yeah.
have the men coaches, and I know most of them are amazing, and they do support that aspect of opportunities, having us, achieving success. So again, this is really something that we need to work together to be successful.
Absolutely. So, with all that being said, because they're all super important points and ones that we could talk about all weekend, and so if everybody wants to stay on all weekend, I'm all in. No, I'm just kidding, everybody. Okay. So the next point is, because I want to go over the next point like kind of quickly, because I really feel like it's important to get to the last part before we go into some Q&A, and we got about 16 minutes left, and as anybody knows me, I'm super tight on time. When there's 16 minutes left, it's 16 minutes. It's not 17 or 15. So I really want to get to under 10 development, because I think that's really important, because as we both know, probably a majority of people that are on or dealing with, clients and players deal with a lot of younger kids. And I was encouraging people to try to come on for that reason. So the last point about female coaches in our sport, we talked about, having the pathway, right? Finding the pathway. So how are female coaches most likely to want to become coaches, right? Or female players, former players, doesn't matter who. How are we going to encourage them to want to become coaches and know that there's a pathway to professional pathway for them? What do you think is the optimum way to do that?
The only way is to create a pathway. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, we want them to stay in a pathway. There's no pathway.
There you go.
It's that simple. So I think it's to go beyond the fact that we're good with little kids. So if we do that, that means it's going to expand to higher level. I think we need to have the guts of our values, if I can say that, and go outside of the box again, and hiring more female coaches at the higher level, and
Right.
making sure that we do and we are a good influence into the generation that is behind us. And when we say that we want to have more female coaches, again, we need to show that we're willing to create opportunities for them. And that's the only way we're going to achieve it. And right now, that young girl that is 13 or 14 years old that I see in a club, that she sees me, that I'm a director of something, that I'm working with other things at under 10 players. And when I say the result, and that's not me at all, but of players that I've coached, they're like, oh, you know what? I didn't know coaching was an opportunity.
Right.
So I think by just doing that, it's like, oh, that 13 will probably stay on to 16. Because she's going to say, you know what, if I'm a better player, I'm going to probably try to be a better coach. And then what I would say is that for any of you that have an academy that is working in a club, just try to create opportunities at 14, 15, 16 for those girls to help you.
Right. Yeah.
And even if you don't pay them, or it's just giving a bit of time and you want to give an hour of private for free to them. If you do that, you show them that there's more that they can do at that age where normally they will slip out of the sport. So that would be what I would do on that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. And I like the idea of adding in, when they get to a certain age, having them help you, right, in different capacities, for sure. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the under 10 development. and then we're going to see if we can cover it in the next, say, 3-4 minutes, if that's possible, even though obviously it should take us longer than that. And then I want to see if we can open it up and see what kind of questions we may get. So I've always been of the belief that there needs to be a balance with younger kids between structure and freedom. I've always been a big believer in that. I think way too many times you see coaches with kids, under 10, younger kids, where it's so structured or it's all free. And I've always feel like the best jobs to get the kids encouraged and growing and developing and making sure they know how to hold the racket and the techniques and all those things that we call the foundation, right? That's what we call the foundation. I feel like finding that balance is really important because the structure develops the skill, right? But also the freedom allows the skill to grow in some ways, right? And also the personalities and things like that and the competition. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I'm gonna say what you open up with. We need to have kids that are more creative. They want to hit betweens. They want to hit on their right leg. They want to jump when they hit a backhand. Why not? I agree with you. We need to make a difference with playing and training. I think sometimes the ratio between the two is too large. Either they play too much and they don't train, or they train too much and they don't play. So sometimes I see a lot of the big differences in the two around my country when I go around and I see the kids. The other thing that I would say is that the aspect of fun, pleasure, enjoyment needs to be 100% there and created by us coaches in the environment that we're going to create. And it starts with, we have kids, and most of you have those kids where they have difficulty running now. They don't do sports. That's the only positive that I have to say in the past 3 months that everybody had to stop, that they needed to be creative, doing something else in tennis, play with a ball, soccer ball, hockey stick, whatever it was. And it's like they try to do something different to base the fundamentals that should be the base of any under 10. And in fundamentals, you have one word that it's called fun. And the fun aspect has to be there. The other thing is, around the world, everybody understands now progressive tennis, kids tennis. We all have the name for it, but from red, orange to green. I think that changed the game. The challenge is that kids progress the balls in regards of age. And I think they should progress also in regards of competencies. The competencies are important because whatever you do, you build for those kids to transition with the regular court and the regular ball. And sometimes we keep them too long, and sometimes we are not keeping them enough. So again, I would say that it's important that the progression is done with the competencies. The progression is done with them learning how to play and compete at different level, and making sure that you as a coach, that you have an eye on what you need your kids to do at each level. So that way they can have those skills, you can know what to coach and what they need at different stages to then go with the regular ball and playing on the full court. Because again, we go very quickly. And the other thing is, even if we don't want to hear that, and I promise you when we do it well, it works, parents are part of the process at that age. So it's our job as coaches to help them in a world that is not easy, guide them into some decisions, and sometimes they will take the wrong decisions, as we do coaches, but it's a team effort, and we need to make sure that we're working together in that perspective.
Absolutely. No, all interesting points. And, I love the view on on the balance and the process and sort of being able to the competency, right? Understanding the game, not just being able to hit shots and run around, but also understanding actually what's happening and why it's happening. I definitely think that's valuable. What we're going to do is I'm going to touch on the last bullet point, and then we're going to hop into some Q&A, and hopefully everybody out there listening is ready to fire up some questions, okay? Because it's been a little bit dry over here in the chat room. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. So finding the right coach that knows how to strike the balance, right? Keep it fun. Make sure they get the technical, the components that we've talked about, but also like encourage that individualism, that freedom, that creativity, because I've always been a huge believer in that. Some people shy away from that because they want to stay in that sort of, that box. And I've always been a believer in being outside the box, right? You see a kid doing behind the backs or whatever kind of stuff, right? Don't go crazy on them, right? Like allow them the freedom because something's in their head. So I'm curious about what you think about finding the right coach that knows how to strike the balance.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you have to find the right coach that is into your own values as parents also. I think it's very important. And again, I think when you find a coach, you need to find a coach that fits with your values, that fits with your goals, that fits where your kid is in regards of development. Because at the end of the day, sometimes we can't choose, because you go to a club, you go to an academy, and you have someone, and the person that is teaching. And as a parent, you need to be able to ask questions, and it's okay. So that's what I would say in regards of that. In regards of coaching, sometimes you do have a choice, sometimes you don't. And when you do have a choice, just ask questions. See if the coach is fitting with your needs and your values. We all have different personalities. My personality on court do not fit with some of the kids and some of the families. And it's okay. It's part of the individuality that we talked about. But again, if your value is having fun, and you have a coach that the only thing he does is yelling and screaming, take your kid and go out somewhere else.
No, absolutely. All good points. And I love the idea of, sometimes something doesn't fit. It definitely happens occasionally for a variety of reasons. And don't be afraid to walk the other way and go find something that does, and ask questions. So we've got a couple of people that are definitely looking for questions. So we've got Roy Karen. I think Roy is from Israel. I'm pretty sure. I've been messaging with him. He says, if I'm reading this correctly, so I apologize, Roy, if I'm missing it. What can a coach do when a female player reaches their teens and the priority changes, parentheses, I like this, friends and social media is becoming more important, and how can we compete with that?
You can't.
You can't.
Next. Again, it's all of this is part of the process. I think you need to just know why those girls at that age are continuing to play and compete. And we have to accept that, what, they're going to look at the way they look. They're going to take a picture in a tournament. They're going to do stupid things, as boys will do. And it's part of the process. For me, it's kind of a little bit the same thing as what I said earlier. We want to change the girls on how they are, and do girl. I had a little 3-5-year-old for an hour this week, and the parents are like, "So how it was, Seb?" "Oh, it's great. I learned about the new ice cream. I learned about a new movie." But that's what it is. They talk a lot. And I was like, okay, so it's part of it, and how can I manage it? It's like focusing on strength versus weaknesses. We're not going to change that. It's there. Sometimes we need to just bring it to what is the commitment. We need to accept that most of the time, some of those girls will stick because of the social aspect of the game. They love the coach. They have friends in the team. They have friends that are there. And that's also okay. But if your group and your training environment is for something different, you will for sure need to address it to those girls. But again, it's finding that balance of, it will happen. Yes, there's commitment. It's done a different way. They will talk to different things. They will talk to boys. They will have conversation that doesn't make sense. But it's part of their age and what's happening at that time. And we're not going to change that.
Right. That makes sense. Live in tennis question is, question a lot of time during adolescence when girls mature, girls drop off. How to avoid this? That's one part. Many time also boys get attracted to girls during practice with girls and it takes a different route, comma, as coaches, we are responsible for kids, but this goes to a new level, how to control this. Did you understand that?
Yeah,
you got that? Okay.
Yeah, I will try to answer it. I think the first part we answered through the process of the conversation today.
Yeah.
What I would say is that, again, at any age, our job as coaches is to be clear of the intention and what we do. And I think it's part also of the process to have meetings 3-4 times a year with parents, with coaches of the do's and don'ts. And knowing that there will be attraction at one point at that age, not a problem, but it's for us to, again, dictate what we do want to have in our coaching and in our training environment. And that's something that we shouldn't shy away and we need to address. And again, at that age, they understand, they want to make sure that they have honesty on our part, and also bring consequences to what happens. Because if this side is not part of it, and we believe in having boys and girls training together, we have to address this very early on in the sessions and making sure that they understand the guidelines and what's feasible and what is not, and consequences if it goes outside of the track of what we expected.
No, absolutely. Those are all good points and definitely, well said. Everybody, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's not bad news, it's reality, is that we have now hit the 1 o'clock hour. So technically speaking, our presentation has come to a close. There have been a couple other questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to allow Sevi and I to address those questions, off the camera, if that's acceptable. And we'll definitely, Live in Tennis had another one. And then Nancy Lally from Connecticut, who I know in a long time, popped on a little while ago. I know she was busy and she's got a question. So we'll definitely address those the best we can off camera. But most importantly, on behalf of everybody, Sevi, thank you very much for the time. It's fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it. I think we had a great session. I think it went well, and I hope everybody out there, you had a great time, and we answered a lot of your questions, and we'll keep you posted on when the next one will be.
Thank you, guys. Have a great summer, everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, guys. Take care. Have a great weekend.